Okay, so let's do the master breakdown for Kanayo. Before we begin, I want to say a big thank you to everybody that is streaming Kanayo. The feedback has been amazing. Very amazing, and we are truly grateful for that. And I also want to make a quick announcement, okay? I recently got accepted into joining the Engine Ears community. Engine Ears. In case you don't know what that is, engineears.com is the only platform in the world for the best mixing and mastering engineers, where you can go and book my services online, as well as check out all of my verified mixing and mastering credits. It's a brainchild of Grammy Award mixing and mastering engineer and mixed by Ali. It's game changing, very straightforward, very organized, and it's easy to use. There's also a site-wide promo currently going on. So if you book my services on the platform, you get 20% off on your first booking, right? And the opportunity to win an all-expense paid trip to South Africa to perform at the Sound of Tomorrow Festival. It's crazy. All you have to do is use the TSOT23 code to book me to enter. That's simple. So this is an opportunity to work with me for less and possibly win a trip to South Africa. Promo lasts till September 1st though, so there's no time. Hit the link in my bio or below this video. Let us get it. Now back to the video. So let me show you how I took Kanayo from this to this. It's actually very simple. So I'm going to walk you through my mastering process. Hopefully you can learn one or two things. Okay, let's jump right into it real quick. So the first thing I'm doing is fixing problems I can hear in the overall mix. You know, back to the same philosophy of fixing problems first before you do any major processing, right? That's what I'm doing right here with the master, and I'm using this dynamic EQ from Ozone to tame some of the frequency points and the record that I think needs to be tamed. First of all, let me turn it off so you can hear the difference. So this is after. All of these frequency points that I've targeted and attenuated a little bit has made the sound sound a bit tighter just across the frequency range. Again, not so much noticeable difference, right? But it works for what I'm trying to do. And I've also turned on gain match just to make sure I'm not adding any gain at this stage of my mastering. And then what? I have another EQ here as well. Right. So with this one, I'm just attenuating 1 dB around 3,800 hertz, just to take out a little bit of harshness. Again, the difference are not like very noticeable, but they're very effective. Because when you're mastering, you don't want to do drastic EQing. Do you understand what I'm saying? You just want to make sure everything is smooth. You're not changing the overall mix per se. You're just enhancing it. Okay. And then I've done a boost around 60 hertz of just 0.5 dB. Just to add small, tiny punch to that kick. And then I'm using the stereo imager to increase the width of our stereo image. But there's something I'm also doing here that I think is very important. In my opinion, this is one of the best ways to approach stereo imaging. Ozone has the stereo imager that kind of works like a multi-band compressor. It lets you split the frequency range into 4 bands, just the way a multi-band. So we have the high frequencies, the high mid, the low mid, and the low frequency. Right. Obviously, with this, you're able to process the band separately. You're able to target the specific band that you want to increase the stereo image of. And whenever you're using a stereo imaging plugin, right, it's very important that you're able to focus on just the highs and a bit of the high mid frequency, to be honest, because you don't want to expand the low frequencies or the low mid frequency. You understand? You want to make sure they're closer to the center. That way you retain the punch that the low frequency and the low mid frequencies carries. Very important. And this is one of the best stereo imaging plugin for that. What I'm doing here, for example, is I've increased the stereo width of the high frequencies up to like 53 and the high mid up to like 22. The low mid, I'm not even touching anything here. I'm just leaving that as it is for my mix. And for the low frequencies, I'm actually bringing it just a little bit closer to mono, just to make sure it's really tight. Okay, that way you have a very dope sounding master with a perfect stereo imaging before and then after. You can hear that the sound just spreads a little bit more on the high frequency and on the high mid, and it just sounds very smooth, and we still retain our very tight low end. Again, gain match, just to make sure I'm not adding any sort of gain at this stage of my mastering process. All right, cool. And then the next plugin on my master chain is this Pultec EQ from Universal Audio. I'm using these to also do some more tone shaping. Let's listen to the before and then after. So this is before. And then after. Right. So what I'm doing here is I'm boosting up to 4 dBs around 60 hertz for the low frequency, and I'm also attenuating up to 3 dB. The Pultec EQ actually allows you to boost and attenuate at the same frequency range, and it sounds good, right? So that's what I'm doing here. And I've set the bandwidth to 5. So it's not sharp, it's not broad, it's just, you know, good size, right? And then for the high frequency, I'm boosting up to 3 dB and also attenuating up to 3 dB around 16 kilohertz just to get that shine, get that smooth brightness. The Pultec EQ sounds very great, and this Universal Audio's emulation of it is amazing. Again, this is before. And then after. Right. So the next plugin on my mastering chain is the SSL G Master Bus Compressor. I'm using these to, you know, just glue the whole track together at this point. So let's see what I'm doing here. So I've set the threshold to, 15 dB. The attack is fairly slow attack. I want the initial transient to cut through before the compressor starts to do its job so that, I can retain my punch. I've set the release to the fastest so that, again, the compressor stops compressing as soon as it's done its job. And my makeup gain up to 2 dBs. Because if you notice up here, we're getting up to, minus 2 dB of gain reduction. So makeup gain is set to 2 dBs. I've also set this to analog, right? So I can get an analog sound. And I've set the ratio to 2:1, right? So that's what's happening here. So this is before. And after. You can hear that the whole record sounds very tight, and it's just a little bit thicker. Everything feels like it's together, it's glued. So the next plugin on my mastering chain is the Abbey Road Saturator, right? So I'm using this to add a bit of harmonic saturation to my overall mix. So this is what I'm doing with the saturator, right? I'm not doing any pre-EQing. I'm only going to be adding analog saturation to the sides, right? So I've set it to side because you have the option of choosing between mid, side, and stereo. So I've set that to side, and then I'm also blending the compounder up to 50%. So I'm blending the original signal with the compounded signal by 50%. So I'm doing 50-50, kind of almost like a parallel compression thing happening there. The compounder basically is like an exciter, right? What it does is it compresses an APU and expands on output. I'm not going to go into too much details about that, but it works like an exciter and it actually sounds good. So what I'm doing here is I've set the ratio of the compounder to 2:1, and I've set it to compound from 80 hertz up to 3 kilohertz. Pretty simple. For the saturator, I'm using the TG saturator. There's 2 types of saturator here. You have the red and the TG. The red will give you a tube type of saturation, and it's very aggressive. You get more crunch, okay? While the TG is a solid state type of saturator, and it's slightly warmer, right? Or rounder sounding, if you will. Okay, so that's how this works. So what I'm doing here is I've set the gain up to 50 dB as well. And I'm also adding just 50% of the saturation to the mix so far. And then on the output side of things, I'm doing a little bit of a boost on the low frequency, just like a 2 dB boost. I'm also doing a 1 dB cut on the mid frequency around 740 hertz. And I've set the Q to be a bit of a tight Q. So that's what I'm doing here with the Abbey Road Saturator. So let's listen to it before and then after. So this is before. And then after. right? So you hear that it just adds a little bit of life to the master, right? But you have to be careful when you use this plugin though, because it can get very, very crazy very easily. You have to always have the mindset of, you know, adding bits by bits by bits to achieve your desired results. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. It's like adding 1 here, 2 there, 3 here, just little bit of adjustments that compound into a massive result or compounds into a great sounding master. So the next plugin on my mastering chain is the IM Pusher from Infected Mushroom. This is actually a very dope mastering plugin. In fact, you can actually use just this plugin to do your whole master if you want. But what I'm doing here is I'm using the clip function. I'm using the low frequency function to add a bit of boost. Just a tiny bit of boost to my master. And I'm using this magic button to add a little bit of excitement to the master as well. The tone is very, very smooth. And that's the reason I'm using this plugin. And again, you want to just keep adding tiny bit to achieve your results. This is my process, but I need to understand that this also changes for different records. So I might be working on that record where I would not need to use the magic function from this plugin anymore because I've done a mix that is very bright already, right? Or I might not add any low end from here because I've already added enough low end from the Pultec and the Abbey Root saturator. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there'll be no need for that. Yeah, but for this song, I'm adding a little bit of excitement with this magic function. I'm just adding up to like, I think it's like 60 dB of that, and then just a little bit of low end up to just like 3 dB, like very, very little, you know. And then it has this function of being able to select the frequency range where you want to actually add that boost. So I'm adding around 37 Hz just to get a very low bass boost. Again, the main reason I'm actually using this plugin is to use the clip function. It also has a limiter function as well if you want to use that. So I'm using the clip function because I like to use a clipper before I go into my limiting stage. The idea is so that I can clip off some of the picks, so that when I go into my limiting stage, I'm not doing so much limiting, if you will, right? I'm not doing so much limiting to the point where I start to squash my signal. Very important, right? So this is before. And now this is after. So you can hear that throughout my mastering process, the sound just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but in little increments that makes sense, right? For the clipping, what I'm doing is I'm clipping my peaks up to say 4 dB, right? So that's what I'm doing here. And yeah, so this sounds good. This plugin also has a stereo image plugin if you want to use it, but I don't like to use any other stereo image plugin aside the one that comes with Ozone so far, because I like being able to just target the frequencies that I want to expand. And then the last and final plugin on my mastering chain is the limiter, right? I'm using the FabFilter Pro L2 limiter. This is a very, very, very good limiter. I'm a huge fan of FabFilter plugins anyway. So yeah. So what am I doing here? So I've set the style to modern because obviously this is modern music. My attack is slow because I want the transient to cut through. The release I've set to be a fairly fast release. Turn off true peak limiting because I don't want to affect my true peaks. I've set the oversampling to 4x because I'm going to be doing a little bit of aggressive limiting. So I'm going to be limiting at least to like 4 or 5 dB. Right. And then what else have I done here? And I've set the output to -0.5. So that means no matter how much limiting I do, we're not going to exceed -0.5. Okay. And for my LUFS, I have targeted around -9 dB LUFS. Streaming platforms want you to give them -14, right? That's why I set here at -14. But just so I can be competitive with what's out there. All right. So this is the before. Right, and then this is after. Final boss. So you can see we're getting up to like -4 dB of gain reduction, right? And it sounds good, you know. We have a very open master. It doesn't sound like the sound is being squashed. You can hear everything in the record, right? Everything sounds great. You have the thickness on the low end, you have the brightness on the high end, you have the stereo width. Everything sounds good, in my opinion. So this is how I'm able to achieve that. Again, remember, this process will change based on the song. I mean, similar process, right? But the adjustment might be different for different records, you know. And sometimes it can be the same, depending on what you're working on. But this is my process. And I hope you learn one or two things here that you can try for your own mastering. Okay, shout out to everybody streaming Kanayo. Listen, I'm amazed by the reception. It's been really, really amazing. Like 9 out of 10 people like Kanayo, right? To the point where they want to share it to people. That's amazing. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear the Project Atmos EP because listen, it gets sick. Okay, so if you're not subscribed to the channel and you like this content, make sure you subscribe, okay, and leave me a like and drop a comment if you have questions in the comment section below. And again, like I said in the beginning, click the link in my bio or link down below to book my services on engineers.com. Okay, so that's going to be for now, man. I shall see you on the next one. Benny out.